Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to Leadership Development with Humble Associates. Great to see you. It's myself, TK. Today I'm here with Arif and Yelena. Hello.
Hey everyone, welcome.
Hello.
Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining in. And hopefully you will see that we have a very interesting topic today, as you might have seen. So today we want to talk about something that has been quite important to us, and this is why we've brought it for you today, because we have heard and seen many messages from you about this particular topic, which is how do you help your organization to improve gender balance, especially when it comes to your leadership team. So that's the topic for today. But also, we are improving things ourselves, and we will get more and more guests. And our first guest today with us is the wonderful Yelena. So, Yelena, here you are. Can you introduce yourself?
Thank you so much for having me, guys. This is great. Thanks, TK. Thanks, Arif. It's been a couple of years since we did anything business related
Mhm.
together. So really nice to be here with you. In terms of who I am, so my name is Helena Mackay. I'm a revenue operations expert. I've been in many leadership roles over the years with a variety of American companies. I'm currently based in the UK. I am also a serial expat. I've lived in 6 countries, US, Singapore, UK, Switzerland, grew up in Ukraine, lived in Tanzania as well, so have quite a good view of the world, so to speak. I've been also doing a little bit of angel investment over the last few years, especially since COVID. Many things have changed for a lot of us, and I have decided to try my hand at angel investment here in the UK. A couple of pet projects, doing a podcast as well, as everyone else does, on expat topics,
Will do.
and qualified as a yoga teacher. So I'm bringing some balance to the corporate world.
Well, that's
Amazing.
amazing to hear. Sadly, here on video, um, we will not be able to practice yoga just yet. I might have to improve the studio, and Arif is definitely doing his best too. But balance is something that we'll most certainly talk about. And it's very interesting that you've mentioned so many countries that you lived with. You even published a book about, moving without shaking. It's quite an interesting position. And I think it's a perfect segue to ask our wonderful viewers to let us know where you are coming from. Where is it on this wonderful planet Earth, or on the orbit, or in the other galaxy you're watching us from? Let us know in the comments. We would love to say hi to you, to the wonderful places you are viewing us with. And as you're doing that, as you're introducing yourself, there's another tricky question that we have for you. Um, we will talk about leadership. We will talk about gender balance. You've probably seen us in other wonderful webinars, maybe listen to our podcast, but we would love to learn more about yourselves. And we would love if you could give us an indication who you are, right? Not only where you're coming from, but actually who you are. And to do that is actually quite easy. Arif, you're an expert in helping our wonderful viewers introduce themselves. So help me help them introduce themselves.
It's very simple. It's just an alphabet jam. So you simply choose an alphabet that represents where what you do in your working life, and put the combination together in the chat window. And we'll lovely to see where you're, what type of roles you're doing, what type of background you have, and where you're joining us from, as TK said as well. So thank you again to all our viewers for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I think, we can see a lot of wonderful people doing putting in A's and B's. So great to see you. And, this is a webinar actually targeted at you. So it's so lovely that you're here. And oh my God, so many so many great comments. And feel free to keep these comments coming, because we will do our best to interact with you as you do. But let's talk about the topic itself, because we have found an interesting report from McKinsey. And Arif, Yelena, I know that you've read this report, and there's some interesting insights there. So what is this graph showing us?
Yeah, I mean, Yelena, I mean, feel free to chip in. But I think when we were looking at this and putting our thoughts together for the webinar, it was interesting to kind of understand from World Economic Forum's research as well what the representation looks like in at leadership level when it comes to women, and the challenges still remain. Going up to 2023, this is what the current data that we were looking at tells us in terms of makeup. It's more profound when it comes to, pronounced when it comes to women of color as well. So that's a further subset of the challenge that companies are still facing. I don't know, Yelena, what were your thoughts when we were looking at this and putting this together?
Report you read, right?
That's
And we
true.
see a lot of information on while maybe overall percentages of women representation has improved, and women in particular, because that's why you invited me to talk about women's role in leadership opportunities in many tech companies that I have been in. I think there has been an improvement, yes. However, if we look at the top role, board roles, senior executive roles, CEOs, and so on, those numbers are not massively growing.
Yeah.
And while we obviously have a lot more of us represented at different levels of organizations, not as many women are getting all the way to the top of organizations, tech or not. But yes, I agree that there definitely has been some positive strides. And I think the fact that we now have a lot more flexibility with how we structure our work and how we approach work allows us to participate at a high level, hopefully, in many societies, right?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think, yeah, as you said, there's been modest gains, but nothing profound enough that there's been a real shake-up where we can say, yeah, it's fundamentally changed. It's a completely different picture we're in. I was looking at, in addition to that, what we've got on the screen, and as you said, depending on the report you look at, you get different information. Here in the UK, you got the FTSE, index of companies, and there's been a couple of reports going back to 2015, 16, assessing, even at board level, the number of women in leadership roles. There's been actually some changes there, but still it only stands at around 40%, 39, 40% between those over the last couple of years. So it's a lot to be done, as you said.
Yeah, so we have the numbers, and it's really interesting to see the growth. But as you said, Arif and Elena, it's been, I'm not saying laughable, because there is so much effort being put there, but clearly, I think what is needed is there's still some ways to go, even a lot. So the question is, do we think we're going fast enough in trying to build more equality? Is that the pace to expect, or should we actually push for more?
I think we should push for more. We should always strive for more. And I think, another interesting test without looking at stats, right? So imagine you walk into an office, whether you are a consultant like TK or Arif, or you actually work in an office and you are one of those people who goes to the office still. Look left, look right, see your team, see how many people you see who are women, and then think, what roles do they play in your team? Are they still in junior positions? Are they still in maybe administrative positions? While everybody else you walk into sort of on the floor is in some kind of leadership position. So it's sort of, I guess, it's sort of a bit of a satirical view, right? You don't really need a lot of stats. You can just look around yourselves and see, has there been change within your business or within businesses that your friends and family are at?
That's a good point.
I think one of
yeah, go ahead.
Go on, T. No, I think just to add on that, and Yelena, I'm sure you've got plenty of experiences, stories that you can enlighten us all with. But the biggest thing from what I've been looking at, it boils down to the responsibilities at CEO level, really, around making this happen. And if there isn't that commitment, if there isn't that willingness, the change is just not going to be there. But I mean, yeah, what you tell us what you see day to day, or your experiences, if you want to share any around that, it would be interesting to hear as well.
I have seen obviously a lot of public companies where I've worked and where my friends worked making a lot of good commitments, right? not only making those commitments, but following through on them, implementing a variety of programs that can help diversity, not just diversity in terms of having more women, but diversity of any kind, right? And actually, some banking organizations in the city in London have done a fantastic job, and I know people are still upset about the lack of change, but we see progress in terms of approach of senior executives to trying to provide structures and frameworks for existing management teams, existing talent teams to work further on the topic, right? So I definitely can see that, with public companies, yes, it's definitely working. In startup scene, it really, really depends, right? Because the typical excuse that we hear is, well, it's impossible to find women or somebody who doesn't look like me who does X type of a job, right? And because as startups, we rush, we need to, accomplish things very quickly. We just basically don't spend any time looking for alternatives. We take the candidates who are readily available, very quickly available. And yes, typically, if it's technology development or certain type of sales roles for that matter, that's who you get. You get, a classic successful male tech person or sales leader, right?
It's really
It's
interesting. In
it's
this
that
case,
typical problem
go
of
ahead.
hiring in your own image or hiring what's familiar to you, and there's some of that bias involved, isn't it? Is what we see when it comes to why those excuses are made.
I think part of it too, people would say there's no pipeline, right?
Yeah.
And I like reminding people that the funnel is not uniform. It's not like you hire 10 university graduates and then you sit there for 20 years and you wait for these graduates to form and become leaders. And yes, some of them probably will. Some of them actually might make different choices. So in other words, your funnel constantly has to be looking at who are you bringing in, and at all levels, meaning whether it's your university recruitment or apprenticeship recruitment, look who are you bringing. Do you have enough female candidates coming through the first job, entry level job type of environment? And then when you start hiring managers at different levels, are you actually looking at enough female managers who are external to the company to invite them? And some companies do that fantastically well. For example, Salesforce, right? So they very actively seek out sales leaders who are women. They have events where they ensure that women come and are represented and participate and try to be more visible. And so there are many big companies that do it well. But I think it still is on us who are inside the companies to try to bring people who are diverse, who are different, and so on, and promoting people who we identified internally as well, and making sure that not all of those promotions go to people who are exactly like majority of us, but we actually have diversity, variety, and diversity of thought overall.
Brilliant. Thank you.
What I find very interesting, Elena, I think you've covered a very interesting point there in terms of obviously the difference between large organizations that have concerted and focused programs on diversity inclusion, and people actually responsible for tracking it, versus obviously companies that, like startups, that obviously it's possibly not their priority. Now, we have met at a startup, so I know that you have plenty of experience and you've been the head of operations, COO there. So some people possibly at a startup, especially founders, might think that, okay, so I'll get a person that looks like me. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, is there anything that you think hiring a woman leader, an early hire to the leadership team at a startup, can bring into the organization that's unique, right? What's the women leadership style of a startup? That's because people, for instance, that hire in the pipeline might not know that, and I think it's quite important to talk about that.
What's interesting about a lot of startups that I see in the UK, they quite frequently are started by friends. So
Mm-hmm.
it's people who are out of the university, maybe a few years out of the university, and they have a great idea and they go for it. And, again, if it's a group of men who are friends at the university, that's how they carry on, right? And, I actually decided to take a little bit of a different view, and that's where my angel investment interest came from. I wanted to make sure that in the UK, we women participate in investing in other women.
Mm.
And I found it ridiculously difficult to actually identify the type of companies that interest me, that are in the first 2-3 years of development, that have female founders, or at least one female founder. And obviously there are more and more. There have been more focus on that. There actually have been more government program introduced, and certain accelerators are trying to do their best as well. But I think one of the things that we can bring, people who want to participate as investors in some of these SCIS and EIS programs, we can help facilitate those investments, right? And thus, when people are forming companies and looking for money, asking those questions, what is the representation style on your team? If your 3 founders, are all of them the same? Do they all look the same? Or do they have, again, different cultural backgrounds, different gender representation, and so on?
It's a very good point, Elena. I think, this is like helping women founders, right? And sponsoring them. But also, we ourselves, Arif, obviously worked with a startup that actually 2 guys founded it. They were friends, from school and so on. And one of the first hires they actually placed in as they were growing to the leadership team was actually a wonderful lady that became also their head of operations. And they
Nice.
hired her not only because of her wonderful skill in being able to herd the cats, as I would say, but also because she was different to them. And, they were quite, I would say, not saying chaotic, but definitely artists per se. And I think this wonderful person, Deborah, her name, helped to bring different thinking, right? More diversity. But Arif is asking me in the background to move on. So I have something that I wanted to share about our top 3 recommendations. So we've shared some stories about, why it is important, but let's now talk about our opinion of the top 3 ways you can actually do something to get this balance in a better direction. And the first one is all about not arguing for gender balance from a moral perspective, because it needs to be there, but make it a business goal. So, Arif, you've suggested this one, so there must be something there.
Yeah, I think it was in what I was looking at, what I was reading, and I'm sure Yelena has wants to add something to this as well. It was quite obvious that there are business benefits, quite easily identifiable in terms of why you want to have a more diverse leadership team, right? It's not simply just because you have to do that because, as you said, TK, there's a moral imperative for doing that, because it's the right thing to do, or ethical behavior, etc. It's just the fact from a purely business point of view. And when think about it from a leadership, like I mentioned earlier on, you've got CEOs that need to be engaged in this. CEOs need to lead on this. They need to be actively committing to change, and part of that messaging also for them in making the case to their own hierarchy is that, look, there's a business reason for why we must make this a change in the business. So I think it's kind of self-explanatory, but I'll defer to Yelena. What would you like to add to that? Why do you think this might be an important recommendation for organizations?
I really liked actually that one. So when you sent links to read through some of the highlights of your research, I actually was quite fascinated, because I think you do get a bit of pushback when you try to attack people's morals and values.
Yeah.
And it's on anything, right? It's
Yeah,
not just on gender topics. Like if if I'm telling you that it's your moral obligation to do X, Y, Z,
Yeah.
your response typically would be, "Are you calling me immoral? Am I a bad person, right?
Yeah.
My value
For
is
not
different,
doing this and that? I'm just trying to run a business. What do you want of me, right?"
Yeah.
So that's sort of a common response you'd get, and so I like. I don't see it as, by the way, well, some people might see it as a deflection technique, but I don't
Yeah.
see it as a deflection technique. I actually think is as a good focus technique to say, actually, we have studied number of companies, and the companies that had diverse representation throughout all the ranks of leadership, throughout all the teams, not just one or two, they actually get better results. And as
Yeah.
a business, we wish to get better results. And yes, our company values are that we're truly diverse organization, and we want to build people up, and we want to be inclusive, and so on and so forth. But also we worry about what it would look like if we don't take these steps, whether
Yeah.
our people are actually going to start leaving us and going and joining the organizations that perform better on these metrics, if you will.
It's funny because it links to we did a podcast episode not long ago where we were looking at some of this in a more very much broader sense around companies' behaviors and stances on public interest issues, and that falls into this wider ESG conversation, right? Which I think is quite popular now. There are a lot of organizations who have ESG drives or initiatives or programs, and part of that is about having public stances on what should a business be doing and the effect of not having that. And what we looked at, some of the stuff we were looking at was when that isn't there, employees and members of the public are very quick to call out an organization where they don't see them making a stance. So if there is a public interest issue and that company is not saying something about it, that quickly becomes viral. It becomes quite a thing, and they get called out, and then it has reputational risks and all of that. So I think there is a wider, also linked to a wider point around, I don't want to say shaming, but when there is a spotlight being placed on why are you not doing this because everyone else is doing it now and it's the standard behavior, it can exacerbate that kind of reputational element. So I think there's an interesting connection is what I'm trying to say, I suppose.
It's definitely there, and I think I think there's a connection too. Is that's important, but also there's something that not many people know about, which is how do you? And I think Kindra, you in your comment you said about the effort in development, right? So there's many programs helping women leaders develop, but one of the tips we have for you is actually that we need more sponsors than mentors. And Yelena, you've brought this one in. I found it very interesting. So we would love your perspective on this one.
Do you know, I know it may sound a bit controversial, but I did it on purpose,
here,
right? Because, so many years have been spent on building mentorship programs, whether they're internal programs for corporates or they're external programs for entrepreneurs. In UK, there has been a wonderful Sri Blair Foundation focused on mentoring women entrepreneurs in the developing world and all of that. So at some point I did a little bit of mentoring there. And all of these programs are lovely and interesting and nice and great, and they do help people develop skills on both sides, because mentors typically get something out of it as well. They grow themselves, they learn how to help others and share their knowledge, share their expertise. But again, it's that old thing with, we always structure it as if women need to be fixed, right?
Exactly.
And I know I'm not the first person who's saying that, but we don't need to be fixed. We're perfectly fine, right? So, and basically you can mentor and over mentor us and try to tweak only if you had learned a bit of this, then surely you'd be eligible for this job. Oh, but if you also spoke 5 languages, not just 4, then surely you can become the regional blah, blah, blah head of whatever, right? Again, I'm being sarcastic, but ultimately, I think what really drives careers forward is sponsorship. right? So, and think back to your careers, whether you are TK or Arif here, or whether you're listening to us on this webinar. Did you make your career yourself? You've got now to a leadership job. Did you get there all by yourself? Or was there one point in your career where it was critically important for a leader to pat you on the back and say, hey, would you come with me and do this? A big project that gave you more prominence, a greater role that gave you more exposure, you learned more skills, a move, relocation to a different country where you have become a better cultural expert and a better leader, any of those things. And maybe it's something much less significant in size in your perception, but did you do everything by yourself, or did you have a sponsor at some point?
Someone
And
that
even
gave the
looking
layup, yeah.
back at my career, the reason I've been able to do all of these wonderful expat things is because I had a sponsor in my first year of my job at VeriSign, and that made the rest of my career. Had I not had that person, who's an amazing leader, his name is Brian, he's done a lot of good things for a lot of us. But you know, if you don't have that person who says, right, I see something in you, I'm going to introduce you to the right people, there will be an opportunity, and these right people will come back to you, and the whole group did. And sometimes it never happens for you, and you keep stagnating, even though you wish to do bigger, more interesting, greater things, whatever they are for you, but no one has sponsored you and sort of dragged you with them and dragged you to the level you wanted to be.
Amazing.
That's
really good
it's
point.
incredibly important. Before we move to the third point, there's an interesting comment from Manita about what will the AI integration do for balance in leadership teams, and especially around gender. Actually, personally, I think it will be a very positive thing, because what AI can help you with, and we've seen it, we've actually helped an organization introduce a pilot of doing that. AI can help you, for instance, remove gender from the CVs in the pipeline process. It can help you better look for skills in terms of the hiring process. So this can be improved by AI. It's obviously labor intensive and so on. So that's a nice one. We won't discuss it because we don't have the time, but it's definitely an interesting question. Thank you so much. I'll move us to the third one, which is something that possibly a lot of you have heard about, that if you offer flexible ways of working, you hopefully will be able to improve your pipeline in terms of leadership gender balance. Is it only because of motherhood, or are there other reasons why flexible working is viewed by women as something that's really helpful?
I don't know, Yelena, what do you want to start on that one?
Yes, I just have to make one joke about this AI integration. So I have a perfect gender balance in this large office of mine, which is basically the living room. I have a Siri who is a male assistant voice, and I have an Alexa who's a female assistant voice. So my AI assistants are perfectly balanced. Anyway,
brilliant, very good.
But beyond that, to talk about flexible ways of working, I think obviously motherhood is the biggest shift in women's lives, right? And that affects the steps into leadership, because by the time women get to the age that they are by and large prepared to have children, they also get to the age where they feel like they have enough experience to step into their leadership roles and continue progressing. And it's obviously incredibly difficult to do it all, right? And look after the family members and so on. And I have chosen not to have children. So I do not have children. I cannot speak about motherhood. It's a personal choice, right? It's not a forced decision of some sort. However, on the flip side of that, my mother lives in Ukraine. My father passed away in Ukraine, not because of the war, but during the time. And I now have stepped into a role being a lot more active, helping my mother. And this year, I needed to bring her to the UK to organize a heart surgery, right? If I did not have a flexibility and time to do that, that would have been a very difficult thing. And by the way, thank you, she's doing very well, so it's all great. But that's just another example. And typically in many families, females do take that caretaker role. And as we come to our 50s, it happens more and more frequently.
Yeah.
But this is also the time when we are most eligible and interesting for more and more senior leadership roles,
Flash,
right?
yeah.
It's a very good point. Yeah,
There's some other
societal aspect of caring. Arif, go ahead. One comment.
Just quickly, as I know we're running out of time, there was some interesting research on. I was also looking at associated to remote working as well. Unfortunately, can have negative impacts on women as well, because they're not seen to be in the office, or they're not involved in the same circles as many men or the general leadership population of an organization. So because they're not around or they are being flexible, there's a double-edged sword as well. So there has to be a very much proactive effort by leaders, by the CEO, etc., to not de-incentivize, or that's not the right word, sorry, not make a unlevel playing field, shall we say, just because women work flexibly or are at home for whatever reason, right? So there's a red flag there, or warning.
There is, such as the red flag on my wonderful watch, which
clock,
says that we're very short on time. So very quickly, if you want to listen to conversations like this, feel free to subscribe to our podcast, Leading with Agility. And Elena, what about your podcast? What's the title of it?
It is Moving Without Shaking. So I'm continuing with the title of the book, and it's now everywhere on Apple and Audible and Spotify, wherever you listen.
Amazing.
Wherever you listen.
Thank you so much.
And Elena, thank you so much for coming and being our guest.
Thank you.
It was wonderful having you. Hopefully, in some future, we might be able to join you, or you'll join us again on some wonderful topics. Thank you so much for our wonderful viewers for your lovely conversation and comments. Hopefully we'll respond to a few, and also share this video with your friends, share our webinars, because more coming here very soon. Watch this space for tomorrow, and for now, bye-bye.
Bye everyone.
Thank you for having me. Bye.